On today's hazardous weather graphic, we've got a blizzard warning out here for the eastern Arctic coast, Kaktovik, Barter Island, over toward McKenzie Bay and Delta there for blizzard conditions until midnight tonight, for winds gusting to 60 miles an hour. Will be blowing the 2 to 4 inches of new snow around, and again creating visibilities less than a quarter mile or whiteout conditions, much like you've seen throughout the day today. They're continuing through this evening until about midnight, the way it looks at this point in time, and then it should end. And then the other warning area down here for northeast Prince William Sound, high wind warning that goes into effect at 1 a.m. tonight, tomorrow morning actually, Friday morning, and continues until 9 p.m. Friday evening, and that's for Valdez to Thompson Pass, Keystone Canyon, those areas, for northeast winds gusting to 80 miles per hour. And from there, going to satellite imagery, here's the area clouds kind of sliding southeastward here that brought the several inches of snow to the central and eastern interior last night and into today, ending from west to east here slowly because the motion is more southeast than it is off to the east there. And then those clouds extending all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. A lot of clear skies here over the interior, down into southern Alaska again, and some of those clouds getting into the Yakutat area over toward the northern panhandle, but dry conditions on down to the south there, and good clear skies here, as you can see. Kodiak Island up into the Kenai Peninsula, Alaska Peninsula as well, into the southwest interior. Pretty good conditions out here in the west as well. Few thinning clouds coming onto the western Arctic coast there, and really not much of anything out here to the west. This band of clouds is a non-factor for sure, and then some moisture here that's been kind of slipping up from the south there, bringing some areas of light rain and precipitation there from the Fox Islands back toward the central Aleutians, and some of that cloudiness getting up into the Pribilofs. Enrolling this one more time, you can see this system here moving eastward. That's going to continue tonight and eventually bring a chance of snow into the western Arctic coast. But on the chart today, you can see all the clear skies here from across southern Alaska, the Alaska Range, all the way down to Kodiak Island and to the east and well to the south into Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Another pretty good area clearing out here over the northwest Bering. Here's that weak trough with some light precipitation here for the central Aleutian areas there, not quite making it up to the Pribilofs today. And then low pressure developing here in the Gulf of Alaska, creating some showers there, but that all staying off the coast. Could have got maybe some light snow showers occurring over toward the eastern North Gulf Coast there from, say, around Cape St. Elias, maybe in toward Yakutat, and then up in over the eastern interior areas. Again, several inches falling in these areas over the last 24 hours, even 12 hours. Some lingering snow showers along the Alaska Range there, but that's about it. Clear skies out here to the west. Strong high pressure from the northern Bering Sea all the way up to the western Arctic coast. And that building high pressure is what created the strong west winds there along the eastern Arctic coast today. And moving on to tonight, tightening gradient here over the Panhandle as well as along southern Alaska and the North Gulf Coast. So again, supporting that high wind warning goes into effect at 1 a.m. Friday morning there for the Valdez-Thompson Pass area, and there'll also be increasing winds in the Matanuska Valley. Palmer could see gusts up to 50 miles an hour or more, or above 50 miles an hour. Not too bad for Kodiak wind-wise, and then the winds much lighter out here to the west, and light variable winds now over the northern half of the state, all the way up to the Arctic coast for late tonight into the northern Bering Sea with another 1,044 millibar high there south of St. Lawrence Island, keeping it variably cloudy to mostly clear with light winds for Savunga and Gamble. And here's this trough here that we'll see tomorrow. kind of turns into a weak cold front there and brings some light snow or flurries to the western Arctic coast, and then a weak trailing edge dragging across the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island for a chance of some flurries there. And a little bit lower conditions, winds non-existent with this front here, really maybe a little breezy for the western Arctic coast. But strong high pressure here from Mackenzie Delta all the way into the northern Bering Sea, and that keeps it windy. But you can see the gradient starting to relax a little bit tomorrow afternoon, but still tight enough to keep the wind warning going until tomorrow evening for the Valdez area, Copper River Delta area, pretty breezy in the Copper River Basin as well as Resurrection Bay, the usual windy areas in this pattern, but a lot of sunshine to go along with it. Maybe I got a few more clouds than what'll actually be over the Copper River Basin tomorrow, but good clear skies, light northeast winds, keeping it clear well off the southwest coast. Maybe with any luck, you'll see some sun for the Pribilofs, and you could even see some clearing down here, the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, just through those clouds in there to make it interesting. This system continuing to bring a chance of light rain or showers here to Adak, westward to Kiska Island. Otherwise, no big storms out over the Bering Sea, and we'll see going into the first day of the weekend. Diminishing winds here over the Panhandle with mostly clear skies, maybe some few clouds around. Clear skies, southern half of the state into the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, much lighter winds there. You can see a lot fewer lines on the chart here than we had earlier, and that extends all the way up to the north there. Here's kind of the remnants. Had to really look, use my imagination to put that low center up there, but maybe some flurries across the Seward Peninsula in the northwest part of the state, really looking a lot worse than it will be. Whatever falls will be quite light up there, and again, winds diminishing. Might get a little breezier here along that, and just south or north of that trough there in the Bering Strait, Tin City. Might get winds at 25 miles an hour, but that's about it. Light winds everywhere else. Light winds over the Bering Sea, dry conditions, maybe still a chance of a shower or two for Adak and Atka, but nothing significant at all, with high pressure kind of dominating the entire scene here. For lows tonight in the teens to lower 20s, south central Alaska, 5 below to 10 above in the Kuskokwim Valley. Panhandle, lows upper teens to mid-20s, about sums it up there. Lower 20s for the North Gulf Coast. Lower 30s with those strong winds in Valdez hold that temperature up there. And 10 for the Copper River Basin. Highs tomorrow, mid-20s for Gulkana, Glen Allen, Copper Center. Mid-30s here, south central Alaska. And upper 20s to upper 30s for the Panhandle. Near 40 for Kodiak Island tomorrow, and in the 30s for Bristol Bay. Lower 30s. And 20s for the Kuskokwim Valley. And for lows, Saturday morning, a little colder here in the Copper River Basin, down to 10 to 15 below, and 5 to 15 for the lows, maybe even some areas dropping to near zero in the wind-sheltered areas, maybe below zero again, especially up around Willow and those areas, up toward Talkeetna and to the west a little bit. Kenai Peninsula down near zero in some areas, but otherwise in the teens or 5 to 15. And 10 to 15 for Bristol Bay, followed by highs around 20 for the Copper River Basin, and upper 20s to lower 30s, south central Alaska, Mananuska-Sitna Valley, lower 20s out to the west there, Kuskokwim Valley. And for the Panhandle, highs upper 20 or mid 20s to upper 30s. Up to the north, we've got lows tonight falling back below zero as the sky's clear here, even all the way over to Eagle, 2 below your forecast low, and in the minus 20s for the north slope, and 0 to 5 here out for the Bering Strait. Highs tomorrow, lower 20s, St. Lawrence Island, otherwise in the teens in the central interior, 5 to 15 up toward the northern valleys in the Brooks Range, a little below zero on the eastern Arctic coast, followed by lows on Saturday morning. 10 to 25 below here over the eastern interior, and 0 to 10 in the west, and about 5 to 15 below for the Arctic coast. Highs in the teens. Mid-teens here for the Tanana Valley, maybe up to 18 there around the Fairbanks area, and 5 to 15 up to the Brooks Range, and then 0 to 5 below to 5 above here for the North Slope and Arctic coast, southwest coast. Lows tonight in the teens, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, Aleutians in the 30s, upper 20s, lower 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Highs tomorrow, Cold Bay, Falls Pass on Alaska, 42, as well as Adak, 32 for St. Paul.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Other than some marginal VFR here through the central interior, there from the Yukon Delta coast to the border. Pretty good with good VFR southern Alaska, northern interior, all the way out to the Arctic coast, VFR. IFR building here over the southern Bering Sea central Aleutian, spreading eastward to about Nikolsky by morning. Otherwise, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak, good VFR. Southeast coast, VFR, maybe some marginal VFR just off the Prince of Wales Island coast. And that vanishes by afternoon. Nothing but VFR here, southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, much of interior Alaska here. Then some advancing marginal VFR, the weak system dropping into the western Arctic coast, Brooks Range area, and that kind of weakly trails back into the Bering Strait, just clipping Gamble there in St. Lawrence Island. Nothing but VFR over the eastern Bering Sea, marginal VFR for the Aleutians and the western Bering Sea. Next area of IFR right there, and that makes a pretty good jog and expands here into the southwest Bering Sea across the central Aleutians with marginal VFR across Nunavak Island by Saturday morning. Staying really nice over the interior, but increasing moisture up here to the north and northwest, especially along the western Brooks Range, northwest coast there, into the northern Seward Peninsula, IFR. And that extends just about up to the eastern Arctic coast, but staying really nice for the Panhandle. Then for Saturday afternoon, nothing but VFR again over southern Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska here, and the southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR with that system that fell into the northwest. They're kind of spreading across the Brooks Range and North Slope, and again, trailing back to the Seward Peninsula and north side of St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, some IFR here over the central Aleutians to, again, about Nikolsky, and then marginal VFR back to the west. And for passes, all the passes tomorrow, same forecast, VFR. Anaktuvik, Adigan VFR, Lake Clark and Merrill, both VFR, and either approach tomorrow as well as Saturday. And for Friday, Saturday, into the weekend here, rainy looking good with VFR flying. Windy, again, same forecast to either approach. Ceiling visibility is unlimited. Isabel, Kavu flying there. Smintesta, same thing. Definitely Kavu for Tanita. And Portage as well, either approach wide open. Nothing but clear skies. Chilkoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels kind of down a little from what they were now, instead of all the way up to the Arctic coast a couple days ago. By tomorrow morning, 2,000 feet here over the northern Bristol Bay, 4,000 feet near King Salmon. And then for, say, Old Nelson Lagoon, 32 degrees will occur at 6,000 feet tomorrow morning. Otherwise, 6,000 to 8,000 feet here for the eastern Aleutians. And at the surface across southern Alaska, cutting through the Panhandle. And from there, taking a look at icing, not much to show on this chart. Some leftover possible light icing, just a chance of there over the eastern Alaska range as remnants of that moisture kind of hangs in there. And then with that system coming down onto the western Arctic coast, icing threats increase, but just maybe isolated, very isolated, moderate, more likely just some light rime icing. And otherwise, the Aleutians, Bering Sea, remainder of the state, all icing free. Looking at the jet stream, westerlies 65 to 75 knots out of the Russian Far East into the interior. Take a turn southward there, 65 knots right across south central Alaska, 75 knot northwesterlies here over the Alaska Peninsula and dropping off to about 65 knots near Kuskokwim Bay. Light winds for the Panhandle way up there at 33,000 feet. And at 9,000 feet, northeasterlies, 50 to 60 knots here, southeast interior and the northern Panhandle, and a pretty strong band here through the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet area, up to 50 to 55 knots there, and right across Kodiak Island, and light out over the Bering Sea. Westerlies at about 50 knots coming into the western Arctic coast there, in towards Point Hope area, Cape Lisburne. High pressure, light winds over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Same pattern at 9,000 feet, light wind conditions out here to the west for the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Maybe a breeze out of the southeast for the Pribilofs, but that's about it. Very light wind conditions out there. Westerlies up to 30 knots for the western Arctic coast. And then these northeast winds, 60 knots here, Prince William Sound, 65 knots over Yakutat, and about 40 to 50 for Kodiak. Moderate turbulence here, Kodiak Island, the Aleutian Range, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and...
Orion Orion isn't real. It's a totally made-up shape, and that might sound crazy, but it's actually true. And it's not just Orion. Hi, star friends. I'm Trace. Let me show you. Hit the darkness around 9 p.m. and look southwest. There you'll see Orion's super sparkly belt stars, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. Also his shoulders, Betelgeuse and Bellatrix, and his ankles, Saiph and Rigel. The thing is, hang on, let me jump up on here. If we leave Earth and travel faster than the speed of light, we can come around to the side of Orion's 8 main stars, and everything has changed. His belt stars are all spread out, and this is because the stars are all different distances away. Betelgeuse is 624 light years away, Bellatrix is only 243, Orion isn't really there at all. Over here it's a whole new constellation, but just because it's an illusion doesn't mean it isn't gorgeous. Keep looking up.
Hi everyone, my name is Tim Steffen. I'm the Marine Program Manager with the National Weather Service in Alaska region, and I'm here today to talk about exciting marine zone changes which are set to be implemented on March 8th, 2023 across the state of Alaska. Why is the National Weather Service making these marine zone changes? We're looking to provide more specific marine weather information that better represents a given location and improves the accuracy of National Weather Service forecast, watch, warning, and advisory products. The main change we are making with marine zones is adding a new nearshore forecast zone, which will cover the coastline out to 15 nautical miles. There'll be an additional coastal zone, which will run from 15 nautical miles out up to 100 nautical miles. Along with that main change, we're also making additional changes in the eastern Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, the Aleutians, and the eastern Bering Sea. Due to the extent of these changes, most marine forecast zone names and numbers will change across the state of Alaska. Here's a look at the old forecast zones on the left compared to the new ones which will be implemented on March 8th, 2023. The old zones had a coastal forecast zone which ran from the coastline up to 100 nautical miles from the coast, with an offshore zone which ran from 100 nautical miles to several hundred nautical miles from the coast. The new zones will have the near shore forecast zone from the coastline to 15 nautical miles out, colored in yellow there on the map, with a second coastal zone running from 15 nautical miles up to 100 nautical miles from the coast. Additionally, offshore forecast zones will run from 100 nautical miles to several hundred nautical miles from the coast. Let's take a more zoomed in look across the state at some of these changes. We'll start in the Gulf of Alaska. The offshore zone in the Gulf of Alaska will be split, in the eastern Gulf of Alaska, will be split into two. Seen on the map there is PKZ 311 and PKZ 312. An important note for mariners in southeast Alaska is that marine forecast zone names, numbers, and boundaries of the inner channels will not change. As we head west into Prince William Sound, the main part of the sound, which used to be one forecast zone, will now be split into three smaller forecast zones. Users in the Cook Inlet area will note that marine zone numbers will change, however, the boundaries will not. Looking at the Aleutians, you will see the near shore forecast zone in yellow running out 15 nautical miles from the coast in yellow. The coastal zone will run from 15 nautical miles up to 100 nautical miles. And you should also note the Pribilof Islands will now have a nearshore zone running from the islands out 15 nautical miles. Heading north into the eastern Bering Sea, you will see in yellow the nearshore zone continuing to run along the coast of the state. We have additionally added a nearshore zone around St. Lawrence Island. And you will also note that the large coastal zone that surrounded St. Lawrence Island has now been broken into four smaller forecast areas. Noted on the map is PKZ 850, 851, 853, and 854. Heading further north to the Arctic coast, the main change here you will note is the near shore zone addition from 0 to 15 nautical miles from the coast. The zone names and numbers of the near shore and coastal zones will change. However, you will also note the offshore zones labeled PKZ 500, 505, and 510 will not change. To recap, with the extensive changes being made across the entire state to National Weather Service marine zone boundaries, the names and numbers of these zones will change in most areas. Please familiarize yourself with these changes for the Alaskan waters you navigate and the forecasts you use. The National Weather Service in Alaska has created a webpage specifically for these changes. You can visit this webpage at weather.gov/ARH, which stands for Alaska Region Headquarters /Marine. What you will find on this webpage is more detailed information on the changes, including why they were made and what we are looking to achieve with the changes. You will see an official press release from the National Weather Service, as well as important information regarding NOAA Weather Radio listeners. For NOAA Weather Radio listeners using receivers equipped with specific area message encoding, otherwise known as SAME, these listeners will need to add new SAME locations to their receivers prior to March 8, 2023. This is a critical requirement in order to continue receiving automated notifications of special marine warnings. The new SAME location codes can be found on a link on this webpage. Additionally, on the webpage, you'll find several maps, both statewide and of several zoomed-in areas around the state in color and black and white. For higher bandwidth users, you will find links to a GIS map and a story map for additional details on the changes. Points of contact for these changes are myself, Tim Steffen, the Marine Program Manager at Alaska Region Headquarters, as well as my colleague Lindsay Tardiff-Huber, Warning Coordination Meteorologist for Alaska Region. Our email and phone information is on the screen. Thank you for listening today, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on these changes. Safe navigating.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now, coastal water forecast. South coast of the Panhandle, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, these around 7 feet. Gale warnings up here on the north coast for those northeast winds sustained at 35 knots for the day Friday. Gale warnings also for Lynn Canal, north winds 35 knots, east 30 knots for Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, north winds at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. No change for Clarence Strait on Saturday. North winds at 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Small craft advisories, Stevens Passage, north of 25, and small craft advisories also for Lynn Canal, north winds 30 knots. And east-northeast winds for the north coast at 30 to 35 knots. East winds for the south coast at 25 to 30 knots with seas 7 to 8 feet. Prince William Sound tomorrow, small craft advisories, north winds 30 knots with storm force gusts of 50 knots and those seas up to 7 feet. And for the eastern North Gulf Coast, north winds 30 to 40 knots. Western North Gulf Coast, north winds at 30 knots. Gale warnings for the Barren Islands, north at 35. Kamishak Bay, northwest at 30. And Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots. For the first day of the weekend, northern Cook Inlet, light variable winds, 10 knots, but north of 20 south of the Forelands, 25-knot northwest winds, Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, and the North Gulf Coast, north to northeast winds 20 to 30 knots. Prince William Sound, northeast winds at 20 knots, seas down to 4 feet. Kodiak Island, north winds 25 to 35 knots for the day Friday, and the Alaska Peninsula, Bering Sea side, northeast at 20, and the Pacific side, north at 15 to 20, and Bristol Bay, north winds at 20 knots. And for, there we go, Saturday, winds lighter in Bristol Bay, north at 15 knots. Light variable winds here for the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula and an east-northeast breeze at 15 knots for the Bering Sea side. Kodiak Island, northwest winds 15 to 25 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, east-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots tomorrow, northeast at 15 to 20 for Adak and Atka, and the western Aleutians also northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. And for Saturday, western Aleutians, north to northeast winds at 20 knots, light variable winds for Adak and Atka, light variable winds for Unimak Island, Nikolsky, light variable winds for Unalaska Island, Dutch Harbor. So can't get much better than that unless you want strong winds, which you won't get. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, north winds at 10 to 15 knots, north winds at 10 knots for St. Lawrence Island. And for the Pribilofs, northeast at 20, east winds 15 knots for St. Matthew Island. And then for the day Saturday, southwest winds here for St. Lawrence Island at 15 knots, northeast at 10 knots for the Yukon Delta coastline, north at 15 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, Pribilofs, northeast winds at 15 knots, and northeast at 25 for St. Matthew Island. And up along the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow, kind of a variable wind direction there at 15 knots, either east or southeast, much like the central coast here, southeast winds at 20 knots. South to southwest winds, 25 to 30 knots for the western Arctic coast, and basically south at 20 knots there from Cape Beaufort to Wales. And then here from Cape Thompson to Wales, north winds 25 knots for the day Saturday, and about west 20 knots for the western Arctic coast. And for the central Arctic coast, southwest winds at 20 knots, eastern Boulevard Sea coast looking at westerly winds at 20 knots. For tonight, still some lingering light snow, but diminishing, becoming lighter throughout the night tonight here for the eastern interior, north of the eastern Alaska Range. Increasing wind here for the Matanuska Valley, Prince William Sound area, Resurrection Bay, North Gulf Coast, Copper River Delta, and the Panhandle. But light winds up to the north, temperatures below zero there in most areas. And out to the west, not too bad, no storms at all on the horizon, except a chance of rain there for the central Aleutians. And then this weak front brings a chance of snow to the western Arctic coast, chance of light snow. Sunny and breezy over southern Alaska, sunny and light winds in the interior up to the eastern Arctic coast, windy and colder for the Panhandle, chance of rain central Aleutians. And for the day Saturday, lots of sunshine here, central and southern interior into the Gulf of Alaska once again with much lighter winds, and still breezy over the Panhandle with maybe a few clouds down to the south, but generally will be dry, and just a chance of snow up here from the Seward Peninsula into the western Brooks Range area. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.